world of heroes, swords, and magic, the continent of heroes. At this very moment, there is a war of incredible proportions taking place here, involving all nations, races, and species of living beings. This war was started by a demon queen hoping to destroy all living beings and conquer the entire world. Launching their invasion by surprise and with incredible power, the demon army, supported by the power of their queen, was so strong that no one could stop their attacks. They passed through the empires of various races and creatures like a knife through butter, leaving behind only death, ruins, and smoke from burned cities. Mighty warriors, mages, and heroes of various races tried to stop them, but their strength was miserable compared to the demon queen. Very soon, only the human race survived and continued to resist, no matter what. And so the demon queen gathered her army of horrible and repulsive creatures, demons, for the last battle that separated her from dominating this world. But the human empire, due to constant internal quarrels and rebellions, was not fully prepared for the last battle, so after the first defeats, their empire crumbled just like their defense. They helplessly surrendered, forgetting their fallen heroes who stood in their defense. As soon as the human empire fell, the demon queen, by the way, her name was Elizabeth, proclaimed herself as the sole and undisputed ruler of this world. Having covered the whole world with her ominous shadow, she did not want to stop and continued to cherish her evil plans known only to her. Meanwhile, the capital of the human empire is being defeated by an army of demons. Surrounded by the ruins of the once incredible palace and the bodies of the last defenders of this citadel, the High Mage looked at the ruins in despair in the presence of the prince. In the throne room, the High Magician Barrow began to make his last speech, in which he assured that in the future a hero would surely appear who would defeat and destroy the demon Queen Elizabeth, as it was described in ancient legends. He was putting all the despair and rage that he was feeling at what he was seeing around him into it. However, suddenly he fell to the ground from the prince's blow. Taken by surprise by this betrayal, he had no time to do anything. He could only guess at the prince's motives and goals. Prince Vis Malfoy leaned over the defeated teacher and mentor, with a seemingly good-natured face, but his words were pure poison. He said that he should take Her Majesty's orders seriously and that no one was interested in his opinion at all, he was only given orders that he should immediately obey. The Supreme Magus could not even move and only lay helplessly at the traitor's feet. Gathering the remnants of his strength, he shouted in his face everything he thought about him, the traitor of the human race. How he regretted that he had not seen this in him earlier and mistakenly hoped to raise him into the hero promised in ancient legends who would save them from demons. Hearing his words, the prince went mad with rage and, unable to contain his anger, was going to finish the job he had started. The rage and hatred that filled him released his true demonic nature. And when he was about to end it all with words of contempt for his teacher and his father, who had long since died, a voice rang out, a voice of such power that the prince instantly stopped a moment before the end. It was Elizabeth herself. She had other goals for him and death would have been too easy for him to participate in. The prince was forced to stop an inch from his goal. And despite all his desire, he could not finish what he had started. The order of his mistress was so strong. Elizabeth wanted to know more about this prophecy. She wondered if it was really possible that in the future one of these weak and insignificant people would be able to challenge her. It should have been interesting and fun. After all these years of war she had never met a single opponent worthy of her. However, she did not show it outwardly. She just said with contempt, "Worthless man, you'd better explain what you mean, otherwise." She knows 1,000 ways to make a person suffer a fate worse than death. And looking into those red eyes, there was no doubt about it. Then the frightened magician began to shout that the prophecy said that the promised hero must come and only he could pull the holy sword out of the stone. And the day he pulls the sword out, the power of demons over people will come to an end. This holy sword is stuck in a stone platform in the main hall. But then he stopped and assured her that he would never tell her again. And he would never betray the human race. But it turned out that just one look from Elizabeth was enough for him to give her all the information she needed. And in a moment, the platform with the sword emerged from the secret hiding place. It was the holy sword, Alpha, or the First, the sword of myths and legends, which defeated countless enemies. Looking at it, Elizabeth wondered if this legend was true and if the one who would draw it would really have the power and the right to challenge her. Or maybe it was just another nonsense from pathetic people. However, when she touched the hilt of the sword, she felt its considerable power and potential. Immersed in her thoughts, she walked toward the throne. Out loud she said, "How interesting." She approached the throne, with a subtle smile and a twinkle in her eye. She said that she would wait here on the throne until the hero arrived. Thus began the reign of the Demon Queen over all the races and peoples of this world. In the first year, countless guards of demons and traitors stood at the gates of her throne room to keep all her subjects in fear and obedience. But after a year, no one dared to rebel, and the guards became fewer. And even fewer. Fourth year, only a few guards remained on duty. Fifth year, no one guarded the queen's throne room at all. Over time, the seemingly cruel rule of the Demon Queen became familiar to the inhabitants of this world, and life and prosperity began to return to cities throughout the continent of heroes. Bustling commerce filled the streets, and creatures of all kinds hurried about their business. Demons, elves, beastmen, gnomes, humans, everyone had a place in this world. Under the leadership of the Demon Queen, all past disputes and hostility between the races disappeared. Everyone had equal opportunities, and no one had an advantage over others. Without disputes and claims against each other, everyone was finally able to live in peace and harmony with others. Very quickly, the continent of heroes began to prosper and grow rich under the seemingly ruthless rule of the Demon Queen. Because of this, many began to worry and fear the return of the hero, which could destroy the fragile peace. Therefore, an anti-heroic alliance was formed to prevent the return of the promised hero. Elizabeth sat on the throne of the demonic empire, receiving envoys from different races and from remote corners of her empire. The throne room had been restored and was meant to emphasize the queen's power. The only reason for the guests was a single question: "So, is there any news of the promised hero?" The first to speak are the representatives of the elves and dwarves. Twilia, the chancellor of the elven race, assures them that they have already engaged all the wood insects in the search, but have found absolutely nothing about the promised hero. Heimerdinger, the chancellor of the dwarf race, said that they dwarves are not very good at collecting information, but they have collected information from all the weapon shops, and according to this research there is no one suspicious. Then the representative of the humans, Aristotle, spoke, and he said smugly and proudly that he believed that even if the promised hero did appear, he would not be able to stand up to all of us. We didn't have to worry about him at all. The next to speak was the demon chancellor, Jim, who could hardly hide his anger, and immediately said, in response to Aristotle's words, that he might not know because he had only recently joined, but that Her Majesty was not afraid of the promised hero. On the contrary, she really wants him to come. He also whispered that the queen had collected all kinds of ancient books on magic and martial arts to study. At the same time, with a reverent whisper, the Beastman Chancellor added that Her Majesty could destroy the continent of heroes in a matter of seconds. The elf exclaimed that it was all the fault of the idiot Barrows. What prophecy? That's just nonsense. That with Her Majesty they could just let the promised hero die. At the same time, a noise began to come from the doorway, and a clumsy old man entered the room shouting, "Cancel the hero, cancel the hero." Heimerdinger only tiredly noted that as soon as someone starts talking about Barrow, he immediately appears, as in the famous saying. Wearing a loose shirt and pink underpants, Barrow Smith moved around the room, shouting loudly. Once a high magician and priest of the human race, he was now the president of the Demon Queen's fan club and the Association Against the Promised Hero. Once the pride of the human race and a model of behavior and dignity, he had become a henchman and a petty sycophant of the Demon Queen. Just one snap of Elizabeth's fingers and incredible magical power is released from her hand. This stream of magic, like a huge hand, picks up the unfortunate magician and priest, knocking the breath out of him and all the junk he brought with him. Pulling him to her, Elizabeth asks him with a seemingly sweet smile, "Where is the promised hero?" Scared to death, squeezed by an incredible force, he begins to make a lame excuse. That the prophecy might not be accurate or even true at all. Especially if the purpose of the prophecy is not at all what was expected. Like, for example, her unsurpassed majesty. Their sweet conversation was interrupted by the young prince, who said with all his graciousness that the old priest was right. That it was a great insult to believe in this stupid prophecy and apply it to Her Majesty. This unfortunate priest had recently found something that allowed him to say that. Before he could finish, he received a powerful slap from the queen that knocked him out. She didn't even look in his direction and just threw him over her shoulder with contempt. "Get lost, you bum." As soon as he came to his senses, he could only say that he completely agreed with this and realized his pitifulness. The irritated queen called the priest a pile of garbage and threw him across the hall into the wall. With a distinctive sound, he crashed into it halfway through his body, leaving only the edge of his robe and ridiculous pink underwear outside. An expected fate for such a jester. Elizabeth, with a determined expression on her face and straightening up to her full height, began to say that she was the ruler of everything and had reached the top of this world. She held the power of the whole world in her hands. She is waiting for a legendary hero who will be able to challenge her and will finally be able to entertain her. And then he will be just a stepping stone to her even greater glory. She studied all the ancient magic books of the hero continent and after endless attempts was able to create doomsday magic to be ready for the hero's test. And she began to approach the sword she had been contemplating for the past 15 years. The sword, like Excalibur, was illuminated by the rays of the sun, exquisitely decorated with gold and precious stones. The queen continued to approach the sword wondering, why is the hero nowhere to be seen, where is he? She continued to stare at the sword with concentration. And there it was at arm's length, so shiny and beautiful and at the same time powerful and deadly. So, since the hero does not go to Elizabeth, she will come to him. And she took the hilt of the sword with a stone expression full of determination that her subjects had not seen for a long time. As soon as everyone in the room realized what their queen was going to do, they were filled with fear and bewilderment. They all wondered how she dared to do this. They immediately started shouting at her to stop. But their opinion was worthless to her, so she gripped the hilt of her sword with all her strength and tenacity. And with the words, "I am coming to you," she began to pull it. The whole hall was filled with flashes of energy coming from the queen. But even with such power she could not do it all at once, but she continued to pull with all the strength she had. Sweat began to